Greetings to you. We come today to look at Ruth chapter 2, this delightful story with real people in and with great depth. Um, Chapter 2 is quite long and it largely continues the story, though it gives some hints of what's going on. I'm not going to read it all right through, but most of it in chunks as we go through it and comment on it. Naomi, Ruth's mother-in-law, had a kinsman on her husband's side, a prominent rich man of the family of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabite said, said to Naomi, let me go to the field and glean among the ears of corn behind someone in whose sight I may find favor. She said to her, go, my daughter. So she went. She came and gleaned in the field behind the reapers. As it happened, she came to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the family of Elimelech. You probably know that back in the books of Moses, which isn't all that long ago for Ruth. For us, Moses is a very, very, very long time ago. We can't date Ruth exactly, but it's in the time of the judges. Might only be 100 years after Moses, maybe 200, but it's that sort of period of time. Moses very much still in people's memory, and the law of Moses, the only law or rule that existed at all for them in their context. And part of the law of Moses was that the poor, and particularly widows and orphans, were allowed to glean behind the harvesters. That is, to go through the fields after the men and women who were harvesting and pick up whatever they left. This wasn't to be ultra efficient farming with either machines or people picking up every single bit of produce. People were to go through once, and what they picked was theirs or their master's, the owner of the field, and anything that was left or dropped or missed the first time round was for the poor to take. They had to do some work, they had to go through the fields and glean, but it was very possible to survive on it. If there were just one or two of you, a small family, you could gather enough grain to make a meal that night, and possibly hard working a little bit more to sell to a neighbour or to keep for when it isn't harvest time. It's a very stark contrast from the ultra efficient mechanized sort of farming that we in the Western world these days are used to, where maximum efficiency seems to be the heart of everything, rather than generosity and thinking in some way of the poor and the needy. We could divert from Ruth and go into all sorts of other areas of life where efficiency seems to be king or would be king, when sometimes kindness and generosity might not be a bad idea. Anyway, back to Ruth, because she gets back to Bethlehem with Naomi. Uh, we don't know what resources Naomi may have. It's interesting, she has a rich relative. Elimelech is from a family with at least one seriously well-off person in it. But she doesn't lean back on that. And Ruth obviously decides two things. One, she's going to go to work, and this was work, genuine work that the poor could do. And two, that she was hoping for favor from someone, that she could glean behind someone in whose sight I may find favor. kindness. I don't think, and there's no suggestion there's anything sexual in this. Uh, she's hoping she might find a farmer who is kind and applies the Moses law of allowing the poor to glean, and who looks after the poor who are gleaning, because they could be abused, and in some fields and farms they might be. In some fields and farms, the owners or the workers might decide on a greater degree of efficiency than Moses required of them. In some, there might be generosity and kindness to someone who is gleaning. So I think that's all it is. She's looking to go to work and hoping that she'll find a kind uh, employer, farmer. It's not quite employer, uh, but a kind and generous patron who will look after her and make her safe in his fields, picking up what's left. She's looking to work. Verse 4, then came Boaz from Bethlehem. He said to the reapers, the Lord be with you. They're out in the fields. He doesn't need to be first at work in the morning, though we notice he does stay overnight as the reapers do, but he isn't there at the very beginning. He says to the reapers, the Lord be with you, and the Lord bless you, they say. Clearly, he is a godly man, and his workers are godly people, using the Lord, capital letters, Lord, the name of the Lord. These are people who worship the Lord. And then Boaz says to the young man in charge, the foreman of the reapers, to whom does this woman belong? Sees a woman trailing along behind the men, as was allowed, but perhaps not very common. And the young man says, and he knows his job, he's checked out, he's obviously letting people glean. It's clear that Boaz would allow that, and that he, as the foreman, knows that Boaz would allow a gleaner, but at the same time, he makes sure he knows who they are. And the young man says, she's the young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab. She said, please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the reapers. So she came, and she's been on her feet from early this morning until now, without resting even for a moment. So Ruth has done everything very above board. She hasn't snuck in quietly when the men were having a break or lunchtime, or even when they were finishing. She's asked permission to glean behind the reapers, and that's been granted. And she's sort of well known. Her story has been told, and we saw that last time, that people have heard about Naomi, people in Bethlehem, small town. They've heard about Naomi, and they've heard about this foreign daughter-in-law, Moabite, from a country that were very definitely not friends with Israel. But she's there, and she's come back with Naomi, and she's trying to support Naomi. And I suppose Bethlehem is holding their breath and postponing judgment, waiting to see what happens. But she's been a hard worker. She's been on her feet all morning without resting, from early morning until now, whenever now is. Boaz talks to Ruth, verse 8. Boaz said to Ruth, now listen, my daughter, do not go to glean in another field or leave this one, but keep close to my young women. Keep your eyes on the field that is being reaped and follow behind them. I've ordered the young men not to bother you. If you get thirsty, go to the vessels and drink from what the young men have drawn. And she fell prostrate with her face to the ground and said to him, why have I found favor in your sight, that you should take notice of me when I'm a foreigner? But Boaz answered her, all that you've done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told me. How you left your father and mother and your native land and came to a people that you did not know before. May the Lord reward you for your deeds, and may you have a full reward from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come for refuge. Then she said, May I continue to find favor in your sight, my Lord, for you've comforted me and spoken kindly to your servant, even though I'm not one of your servants. There are young men there as well as young women, uh, both working in the fields. Whether they're doing exactly the same work, we don't know. Tradition has it that the men would often be doing the actual gleaning. The women would be supporting, perhaps preparing food, making sure the men had food and drink as they were working and for their breaks, and also um, starting off preparing some of the crops that had been picked. We don't know. It may have been equal men and women on the harvesting work. Ruth isn't taking anything for granted. She isn't presuming. When Boaz talks to her and is very kind and says he's told the young men not to bother her and that she's welcome to drink from the water that the young men have drawn from the wells, she doesn't presume that I'm your relative. Thank you. I'm your relative. Name is daughter-in-law. Thank you. But it's nice to meet you, Boaz, relative. Nothing like that from her. Why should you take notice of me when I'm a foreigner? You've comforted me and spoken kindly, even though I'm not one of your servants. She is utterly humble. She acknowledges she's a foreigner and not entitled to anything. She acknowledges his kindness. He recognizes there's something special about her. She's obviously still young, and he is clearly much older. He's he's impressed that she hasn't gone after the young men. Well, one way a young woman could find her way into society and find security for herself, of course, would be to find a young man, a Jewish Bethlehemite young man. But she's not doing that. She's going to work to look after herself and her mother-in-law. She's not looking for a man to provide for her. She's taking advantage, yes, of the Jewish system that people were allowed to glean, but she's expecting to work for her living and to do so humbly. And she's certainly not trying to exploit her relationship to Boaz in any way. But he is impressed, and we're getting into some of the amazing theology of Ruth in this passage. You left your father and mother and your native land and came to a people you did not know before. May the Lord reward you. May you have full reward from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come for refuge. None of this, you're a foreigner, but you're doing the right thing. You're a humble woman, you're a hard-working woman. You've been loyal, utterly loyal and faithful to your mother-in-law. You've come from your own country to a foreign land to continue to look after and be with Naomi. We've heard this. This is impressive. May the Lord reward you, and then may you have a full reward from the Lord. That is more than just a reward. It's a sense of being honored and a sense of belonging. Not just may the Lord reward you in terms of feed you from day to day. May you have a full reward. And he goes on, a reward from the Lord, the God of Israel. And he's using the name of the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come for refuge. She's the Moabite nation. Moabites and Israelites were not friends, and Israelites certainly didn't have to befriend or look after or honor Moabites. That was not expected at all. In fact, they were allowed not to. And he sees that she has come to the Lord, and he knows enough of the Lord that his wings are wide to receive those who come for refuge. He sees that she has come to Israel to live as something less than a servant, but to live in the safety of the land of Israel, where the poor are provided for, provided they work, and where there's a different God from Moab, but a God who will welcome and provide refuge and provide warmth and security and comfort. Moab's understanding of Israel and the God, but Boaz's understanding of Israel and the God of Israel is such that people are welcome to come in from outside and be part of it. And that the generosity intended for Israelite poor could also extend to the poor of other nations. And he's not making any conditions, but he's seeing that Ruth is coming into Israel both humbly and ready to work hard. And he is impressed and he invokes God's blessing upon her. He has a real theology of God and a theology of Israel, which we don't always see. Verse 14, at mealtime, Boaz said to her, come here and eat some of this bread and dip your morsel in the sour wine. So she sat beside the reapers, and he heaped up for her some parched corn. She ate until she was satisfied, and she had some left over. When she got up to glean, Boaz instructed his young men, let her glean even among the standing sheaves, and do not reproach her. She should normally only glean in the areas they'd cut already. Well, they wouldn't have picked everything, but they go through cutting the sheaves. Let her glean even among the standing sheaves. She perhaps doesn't know the system. She doesn't have that sort of agricultural background, it would appear, or she wouldn't be among the standing sheaves. But she's mistakenly got a bit ahead and gone into the standing sheaves a bit. And Boaz says to his men, don't worry, just let her. She's not doing any harm, and we want to be generous to her. Now they're going in with scythes and whatever because they're cutting the sheaves down. But if she picks some ears of grain before um, they cut down, that's fine. That's fine. Don't worry. You must also pull out some handfuls for her from the bundles and leave them for her to glean, and do not rebuke her. In other words, be gentle with her, be a bit over gentle. And if, as it were, you drop some of what you've cut, that's fine, because she is welcome to have a generous portion of the gleanings. And this, again, there's no suggestion there's anything sexual here. He is honoring her loyalty to Naomi, and he is wanting to show that his God, the God of Israel, is generous to the needy foreigner who comes to Israel for security. 17. So she gleaned in the field until evening. Then she beat out what she had gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley. Not bad as a day's work for someone who wasn't used to it. She picked it up and came into the town Her mother-in-law saw how much she had gleaned. Then she took out and gave her what was left over after she herself had been satisfied. Her mother-in-law said to her, "Where did you glean today? Where have you worked? Blessed be the man who took notice of you." So she told her mother-in-law with whom she'd worked, saying, "The name of the man with whom I worked today is Boaz." Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, "Blessed be he by the Lord, whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead." Naomi also said to her, "This man is a relative of ours, one of our nearest kin." Nearest kin, big theological theme, uh, sometimes translated kinsman redeemer. Again, that goes back to a bit of Leviticus in the writings and teaching of Moses. We'll see more of the kinsman redeemer in the next two sessions. So we're not majoring on that today, but we're noticing it. It's a little word goel in Hebrew, um, nearest kin, next of kin, kinsman redeemer. It's a lot of weight on a little word, and that's partly because of Leviticus, as we'll see next time. But uh, special, someone who had something of a duty to care. At least an opportunity, but probably a duty, depends how you understand the Hebrew. But of course, there wasn't police force, there weren't courts in the sense that we know them that would enforce any duty of care that Boaz might have had to his family, uh, slightly distant family. But he's well off and they're not. That Moses had said this is what should happen, but there's no one enforcing that. It's not quite an anarchic state that they're living in. It's a time when Israel was ruled by the judges, but it's not quite judges as we know them. And certainly not a judge who would order a rich, successful farmer, landowner to take in a distant relative. That sort of rule. She couldn't go to court and ask for that. It's not that sort of issue, but more of kinsman redeemer next time, or nearest kin, or next of kin. But you'll know that in the Middle East, still today, people talk about relatives and cousins, and they have quite an extended sense of family if they don't all live together. Many of them might live in the same village or town, and people will be aware of having many cousins. Um, cousin, a word that's used a little bit differently from ours. Uh, Elizabeth was a cousin of Mary in some translations. Elizabeth, the mother of John the Baptist, a cousin of Mary, the mother of Jesus. The word probably should be translated a relative, a kinsman or kinswoman, or of the same clan or wider family. It doesn't necessarily at all necessarily mean cousin in the strict biological sense that we use that word for. Naomi says to Ruth, "This man is a relative of ours, one of our nearest kin." That doesn't mean what we would call in the West a close relative necessarily at all. But there's a glimmer in Naomi's eye, in a sense, that nearest kin, and using that Hebrew word goel, which it would appear that they do know something of their laws, what we would call their scriptures, what Moses passed on to them, and that the Goel was a special figure, a kinsman redeemer, as a lot of translators and theologians put it, and that's quite good. But it makes us stop and think, and it's a lot more syllables than a simple word like Goel or even next of kin. It's got a depth of meaning for next time. Then 21, Ruth says, he even said to me, and they stress that the author, possibly, probably Samuel, the author, knows what he's doing. The words matter. Ruth the Moabite said, let's stress that she is foreign, that even though Naomi might be next of kin, or no, might be a relative of Boaz, and he might be of hers, Ruth is still a foreigner. And her only relationship to Naomi is by marriage, and that marriage has ended in death. So it's all a little bit distant. She doesn't, Ruth has no claim really on Boaz. Ruth the Moabite, stressing that, says, he even said to me, stay close by my young men until they've finished all my harvest. Would stay in my field, stay here. We've got plenty going on. There's enough for you. Don't look round for more work. We will look after you. Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, it is better, my daughter, that you go out with his young women. Go out means going to the fields, working. Otherwise, someone might bother you in another field. So she stayed close to the young women of Boaz. Again, note, she's not chasing the men. She's staying close to the young women. And however they did their work, the men and the women, it does seem there was a bit of a separation between them, the men in one row, the women in another, the men doing one sort of work, the women another. They weren't mixing and socializing, as it were, at work. They were keeping separate. It's better, my daughter, you go out with his young women, otherwise someone might bother you in another field. So she stayed close to the young women of Boaz, gleaning until the end of the barley and wheat harvests, and she lived with her mother-in-law. Several different harvests during the agricultural year in Israel, fertile land, different crops growing, good weather for a long period of time. The barley harvest came first and the wheat harvest later. There were other harvests going on of other crops, but clearly barley and wheat were what Boaz was up to in those fields. And if she's there right through the barley and the wheat harvest, it's right through from the spring, late spring, to the autumn, uh, late April to September, right through the long summer. She's there working in the fields, living with her mother-in-law, and being the breadwinner, quite literally. Till next time.